Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. And today we have another brand new set of crazy revenge stories for you. But before we begin, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story is, gets a job just to make life hell for one woman. My auntie is a great woman. A little crazy, but great. About 15 years ago, my cousin got her first job in a warehouse. She loved it. My cousin Danny isn't like the rest of my family. We're gobshites, but she's really quiet and sensitive. She was fine in her job for 2 weeks. Then a woman who was at least 20 years older than her started bullying her. She started giving Danny a huge chunk of her workload and telling her to get it done because bosses say so and crap-talking her. Danny came home every day crying because she made her life hell, but still stuck it out because we're fighters. My auntie hated this, but she did love getting her own back. The next week, Danny goes to work and has to meet the new workers in orientation. My auntie stood at the front of them smiling at her and waving. She'd applied for a job at the same place to look after her until the woman left. Her plan started the next day. After having worked in warehouses before, she got the hang of it and was very efficient. She also made a point to get her work finished quickly so she could take on others' work, mainly the B words. After doing this for a week and talking to the managers in the smoking area about the work, and my auntie says that B has just been standing around with no work, then others have noticed too and aren't happy. The managers must have kept an eye on her as she was in a meeting a few days later. That upset her and she was venting to a lot of people. My auntie used this as an opportunity to go to the manager and say that B had been abusive and threatening about the warning to her. The B was called into another meeting and fired a week before her holiday month-long cruise. One of the managers, my auntie befriended and has been a close family friend since. She's known as Auntie Debbie in my family now, and she still knows the B word and said that she was horrible to work with and had many warnings for hostile work environment type things. She's now divorced, overweight, and bitter, and keeps asking Auntie Debbie to make her birthday cakes for family members for 5 pounds. Your aunt was an absolute savage, the destroyer of Karens. And our next story, Bridezilla Catering Rage. I used to manage a catering company for my boss while he was undergoing chemotherapy. This is one of my first gigs where I was in charge. The bride calls me at 1 in the afternoon the day before the wedding and decides she wanted a cheaper menu. She and her husband already paid for almost everything, and it's far too late to change anything. I told her that, but she started throwing a fit, saying that she wanted to change the steak to chicken and demanded we either serve chicken or charge her the price of the chicken, as she would not be paying for anything extra. I informed her that according to the contract, she's to receive 150 steak lunches at a price of $50 per plate. It also states that she can't change the menu unless she does it at least a month before the wedding. When she hears this, she flips the hell out and starts screaming at me, calling me illiterate, and telling me her fiancé is a lawyer and will sue me, etc., etc. She hands the phone over to her fiancé. He also started screaming at me, saying it's his damn wedding and he can have whatever he wants. They end up firing me at the moment, and I inform them the cancellation fee is 90% of the cost of catering, which was already paid for. And they start screaming at me, telling me that I ain't crap and they can get anyone to cater for them, and they're going to make me pay for it, etc. They end up hanging up on me, thank God, and I had an inkling that I should probably keep making the food in case they call tomorrow and want us to cater. So we finish cooking, and the next day at 7 a.m., I get a call from the groom, and he demands that I come down there to cater their wedding, or they're going to sue me for not providing service. I calmly tell the guy that they terminated the contract yesterday, and as per the termination clause on the contract, we're entitled to keep 90% of the cost of the catering. He is raging. He didn't say anything, but I could feel how mad he was over the phone. After a moment of awkward silence, I inform him that if he would like us to cater the event, he has to do same-day catering, which is 3 times the original price I charged him. He has to pay all fees in advance, and the food depends on what we have available and ready, and we also reserve the right to refuse service. He gets really PO'd at this point, telling us this is extortion. He already paid for the food, so he didn't have to pay again. I informed him again of the termination clause and also informed him that the food was for a previous contract and that contract had ended and he would have to pay for it again. He ended up starting a new contract with us for 3 times the original price. He tried to change the menu again, just to spite me, but I then made sure he knew I reserved the right to refuse service. He and his bridezillas kept everything the same down to the baby carrots and, of course, the steak, all while paying me 3 times the original price if they just stuck with the original contract. As soon as we got to the venue, before I got anything out, I made the bride and groom sign the new contract plus pay me completely in advance, $22K, and left to deposit the money. While I was gone, they harassed my caterers and threatened someone with deportation even though they were legal. He tried to sue us later, and the judge heard the recorded phone calls, saw the contract, and told him to pay my legal fees. I looked them up on Facebook recently. Apparently they're divorced now. It's only been 3 years. That's awesome. That contract was designed by someone who dealt with these types before. And our next story. I think I took my old company down over a $240 dispute. I was the lead editor for a production house. We did mostly commercials for radio and television. Small company, but we did pretty well for the most part. But being a small company, jobs overlapped. And since I know how to use Google, I also became the IT guy. I worked at this production house for 8 years. Overall, I was pretty content there. I made some awesome friends, but my boss, the owner/production manager, was a real jerk. He was the kind of guy who would hire people for as little money as possible and get them to work 12 to 16-hour days for the effing experience. My boss was the kind of person who'd tell you on a daily basis how great of a boss he was, how effective a leader he was, every day wasting his time and money on ridiculous meetings that literally took half a day and consisted of nothing meaningful but a huge amount of head inflation. He would routinely deny people any kind of monetary raise, even after years of experience, saying that the company could not afford that, all while he furnished his private office, which was an entire floor above the rest of the office space, with extravagant furniture and expensive decorations. I could honestly make an entire subreddit on how awful a boss/terrible a person this guy was. So after some quick reflection on how much typing I wanted to do today, here's a bulleted list of the worst things he was doing on company time. Drinking and driving. Would routinely get me to pirate software for him, including software we use to actually run the business. Not putting anyone on payroll, which means you are forever a freelancer at this company. Hired a company who would build an entire second story to the office without a permit. Somehow crossing the Canada-US border drunk and with open alcohol. Withholding people's pay. Buying things for the office, stealing them for home. No vacation time or pay. He expected all of us to either work through a client's funeral or take a couple of hours as no-pay leave. He would degrade all employees, but he was way more harsh on the female employees. Would literally scare people into submission. Micromanage everything. Blame the employees for following directions. Anyway, the list goes on, but for the most part, none of this really affected me. Until his wife started working for the company. She was hired on after being fired elsewhere as our accountant. She would track our hours every day, making sure to conveniently neglect any extra time we put in over weekends or after hours. Somehow, even after working 50 to 60-hour weeks, she would come after the employees saying we were only available for 30 hours or so. Again, these were all things that never really affected me until Christmas 2015. I got notice 2 days before our Christmas paycheck via email that the accountant was going to take $240 or so off my regular pay because I had left the office for 2 hours during the week. I calmly replied to the email that we all got to do what we got to do and hopped online and started applying for editing jobs elsewhere. I told my wife about this and got irrationally mad about it. Nearly instantly, I was offered a job from my current employer, which I accepted. At that point, I told my wife I'd give my old employer a year before they closed down. We made a list and dealt with each item to the best of our abilities. I anonymously reported both my boss and his wife for drunk driving, as well as letting a couple of my cop buddies know about it. On my boss's Facebook page, he was complaining about how many times he'd been pulled over recently. He seems to still be driving, but at least it was an inconvenience to him. I reported the software piracy. The pirated software was Windows, Microsoft Office, and the Adobe Creative Suite. Adobe didn't do anything, but Microsoft took it pretty seriously. And I heard from one of my old coworkers that they didn't fight the fines. I also filled out Form CPT-1E, I think that's what it was called, which was designed to help employers and employees understand whether or not employees should be on payroll or not. From what I gather through the grapevine, This led to something called a forensic audit, which seems to have led to a lot of back payments or something. I'm not an accountant, and I don't really know how this all works. But from what I understand, my old employer ended up paying quite a few fines. This is all unconfirmed grapevine stuff, though. I reported locally regarding the floor that was built without a permit. More grapevine stuff, but it seems that made selling the office a little more difficult. So I'll add that to the win pile. So anyways, I was wrong. I told my wife it'd be a year and they would be shut down. It took a year and 3 months. The company officially closed March 31st, 2017. I don't know if any of my actions are directly responsible for the closure, but I like to think I at least pushed it in that direction. Oh, and I also texted his wife to take a look at his browsing history. Not really proud of that one, since I would normally not out a person, but it turns out he'd been sleeping at the office almost every night since I did that. You're supposed to get a cash reward for software piracy tips that turn out positive. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.